Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Today I want to talk about this effort to steal our reality. What's really interesting in the 21st century, especially in 2023, we can see how our reality is being approached, I would say, by technologies that want to completely wipe out everything that you see with your eyes. They want us to wear augmented reality lenses in some capacity, right? They want us to put glasses on initially, then probably get some contacts, then some eye surgery. They may find a way to do it like they did it in the movie Brainstorm with Christopher Walken and Natalie Wood, where you just wear something kind of attached to your head. And they will mess with your visual cortex, and they will change what you see. The other thing that was in Brainstorm was that they took over all 5 of your senses. So bad so that if someone recorded a heart attack, that person would start having a heart attack if they played the other person's tape back. We have to assume that there's research going on in all 5 senses. That eventually they will put us in something that's sort of like a simulator. Maybe something that we're kind of in right now. Who knows, right? Let's take a step back and look at how interesting this whole phenomenon is. You might say, oh, well, this is to yourself, you might go, this is a real modern thing that's going on because of augmented reality, virtual reality, video cards that could process 3D, that's indistinguishable with reality for most human beings that don't have an educated eye. But what did they think when they first saw a photograph, when humans first saw a photograph? In fact, we can go all the way back to paintings that the Vatican showed humanity with a picture of Christ, a painting of Christ giving the key to the Pope. They put it in this little room, and I saw this from the documentary series by Sister Wendy, who's passed now. She was a Catholic nun. And she said, people walking through this little annex room that was attached to the Vatican to see this painting, the line was 11 miles long on the first day. And it was twofold. One, everyone thought what they were looking at was pure reality. And they thought that Christ did give the Pope the key to all commands that humans should follow here on earth. That's step one. But what she also admitted in the documentary was that it was forbidden by the Vatican for any painter to paint a photographic likeness of a human being for several hundred years. You had to get approval of your content, who you were painting, where it was going to be exhibited, because they knew that that was essentially the virtual reality of the old days. So you fast forward up to the photograph, which, technically speaking, one could say lots of art and etching and methods of printing photograph-like images in newspapers had been around even before that. But once a photograph arrived, oh my gosh, it didn't take long. It was in the 1850s that someone came up with a stereogram thing where they would take an image pretty much where the right eye was, and another lens with another roll of film would take one where the left eye was, and they would make one print. You could put this viewfinder up to your head and see a stereo image. I mean, perfect stereo, not that Viewmaster crap where it's flat, but it's closer to your eye or further away from your eye. Amazing how quickly man figured that out. And that was very literal, right? You looked at it, it was literally coming into your eye, and you would feel however you felt about it. When fiction got added to it, you essentially had movies before you had radio. So now you've got moving pictures, not 3D at first, although the technology existed, but it took about 3 decades into the 20th century to really master that. People suddenly realized that kids were walking in, and adults and everyone walking in and seeing a virtual story, a fictional story, and that became reality. But they also knew at the time that they were usually seeing 100% fiction. Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, productions. When World War II came around, and I'm sure this happened for World War I. I don't have a lot of evidence for World War I, but I'm sure this happened. Movie theaters would show you war propaganda before a movie. A lot of it made by Walt Disney, as a matter of fact, because he made a ton of money off of it. He's always trying to finance, the next movie he was making, animated. And they would basically give you a bias as to who's the bad guy and who's the good guy. As I mentioned last episode, of course, you have animation. But again, animation looks fictitious, right? It looks amazing, but it's fictitious. You don't really lose the illusion that you're not staring at something that is really happening in the real world. You know you're staring at a fictional picture, no matter what anyone says during those productions, right? Then the television starts really hitting around 49. Was it Bang & Olufsen was, I think, the first major mass-produced television in the world. Little tiny thing, 9-inch monitor, if I remember right. Kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Till 1965, RCA loses the patent for color, and then boom, the whole world turns into color. It took Norway apparently till 1972 to flick their television into color. But now you have, at the same time, color movies from 1939, Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz. We know Technicolor movies that we can watch today in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and up were just better than reality. I mean, it's just phenomenal how much your mind would just absolutely usurp what you're seeing on the screen. As the technology got better, audiences went more and more because the experience was more enveloping. I'm going to say this over and over and over again. Marshall McLuhan, who coined the phrase medium, which became media, he constantly said, it's more important that you pay attention to the form of which you get this information, the medium itself, than the information. That's the first priority, is to figure out how immersive this technology is to your brain than the information you're getting. Obviously, the second is extremely important, but the first one, most people weren't paying attention to, if they were paying attention at all. We were happy that we were able to save these events, and I'm certainly happy that old movies and old television shows and old radio shows got preserved. It's amazing to listen to old X-1 episodes from the 50s, to watch any one of the television shows, old Jack Benny shows, George and Gracie, heirlooms to Hollywood, the good Hollywood. But yours truly went through 3 huge pushes for virtual reality. First one was in the 90s. The second one was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then this recent one, which was about 2017. Each time this occurs, I get more and more involved. I'm paying attention to the technology. But what was interesting this last round, and my involvement was getting involved with my buddy Richard Taylor, and we created the first time anyone had ever seen cinema level 3D LED theaters. We put this together with a couple vendors. Vendors were making the LED technology, and it wasn't like it wasn't being pushed in 3D in nightclubs at 6 millimeters, but it was more of like a stage thing. It was like some wild pattern on the wall. You'd have to walk away, 50 to 100 feet to make it look remotely like a photograph. But we brought that technology down to 1.9 millimeters, and then eventually another gentleman and I, he's already passed, unfortunately, we perfected a film that went over the LED PCBs, the little screens that let you use passive glasses. And the 3D that you see with passive glasses on LED screens is the most phenomenal LED you'll ever, or 3D you'll ever see in your life, ever. And it's going to keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. If they could manufacture a lens on top of the LED packets and then have a robot assemble those packets for left eye, right eye, you'll be able to see a movie with a level of reality that you can't distinguish between this reality. Just sitting in a movie theater, just 10 feet away, 2 millimeter, almost looks photographic. It does, to be honest. I taught the first accredited VR class for Chapman University with my buddy Richard. I spoke at several conferences here in Los Angeles. I brought them the Marshall McLuhan concerns, and people loved it. But what was interesting about it was that I got into augmented reality about 2003 as a commercial product I was trying to sell to big marketing firms like Shyday here in Los Angeles. If you don't know them, they're the ones that came up with the really wild dancing iPod commercials back in the day when Apple was pushing that out. It was a little too sophisticated for them at the time. Then it rebirthed sort of in laboratories around 2015, meaning a bunch of companies developed technologies, Microsoft has the technology. Google has the technology. Apple has been working now at least half a decade, if not a decade, on their technology. There's big rumors that this thing is eventually going to come out. There's a bunch of really cutting-edge scientific claims that screens have been added to people's eyeballs, and that you can have it surgically added to your eye and then surgically removed from your eye. And the big claim was that the Secret Service have a few people on staff that actually have these. I've never met anybody that claims that that's the truth. But we have to assume they develop technology that is absolutely beyond where we can conceive. So I believe that all of the technology that I'm going to mention in this episode is either actively being developed or it's in its several versions in its release form, perhaps in more secret organizations like government, military, and security, and that sort of thing. I don't know what it really means to take a whole generation and convince them to put eyewear on like Ready Player One, where everything that you look at in the world, it's going to be a combined use of certain technologies which already exist, and we'll talk about this. It's going to read the room. It is going to see an object. It doesn't need to have the entire object fully recognized. It just has to have, for the lack of a better term, a smoking gun part of its geometry to know, oh, no other object, just like when you do Shazam to figure out a song, what Shazam is doing is listening to a tiny slice of the song, converting that into a number and looking up in the database, because no other song sounds like that song. When they match, it links you up and you find the album. So the same exact technology that that's doing, imagine converting the data into 3D. So your glasses are taking in something using what's called a LiDAR technology, which is a bunch of sensors that reach out to the room. It works several feet away, and it sees something, sees a trash can, sees a computer, sees whatever. Unless it's something that your family created, like your cousin created a little sculpture when they were little, the computer won't know what that is. Then you're probably going to go into a different technology where it tries to approximate what that thing is. Maybe even puts a dummy thing in that place. Maybe it leaves it in your glasses because it can't figure out what it is. But because we are consumers, right? We buy every product from our Norwegian furniture company, from Target, who's trying to sell you underwear where you can hide your junk, all that good stuff. Especially things with brands on them, logos on them. The companies are going to cooperate with the technology, so they're going to try to add distinguishing marks on each one of the products. Well, what's going to happen is there'll be a global database. It's already being developed. I talked about this a few episodes ago, of every single 3D model of everything that's ever been commercialized. So that when your eyewear reaches out to the room, it will find a piece of technology and it will substitute immediately a perfect version of it in your eyes. But it can also substitute something else if it benefits somebody who's peddling this technology. Now, I don't know how to mirror that up to what we think we've basically discovered about things like Agenda 2030, where you're going to have a huge reduction in population. I don't know. Once you have population in a concentration camp and completely controlled, I don't know how important this would be, because controlling them is 100%. But maybe you can make a concentration camp look like Club Med. You have a little tiny room, and then the room can emulate whatever location you want to feel like you're in. So you're in a tiny room, but the walls go away and you feel like you're in Cairo back when the pre-dynastic people are writing hieroglyphs. Who knows? Maybe you spend credits to get better realities. That's what's coming up. It's going to take a while to pull this off. But just like all technology in the world, if you study anything in the history of computers, microcomputers especially, if for those of you not computer geeks, the history is actually fairly simple to understand. We all know the computers back in the 40s that helped fight wars and do calculations to help ships fire onto coastlines. What they did was they had a supercomputer in Washington or anywhere on the East Coast strategically, and then they had boats all the way across the Atlantic. And so what happens is when a boat's trying to fire on Germany, let's just say, or the coast of France, I should say, occupied by Germany, they would send the information they had across all the boats through radio over to Washington, which would be put into a computer. They would calculate the calculus and push it all the way back to the other boat. Everyone would change their guns accordingly and fire. Well, that was governments only having computers because they were gigantic, horrible, big computers, right? And obviously we know with silicon chip advancement, PC board advancements, it all got really small up to about the 70s. And then in the 70s, a miracle happened. Little tiny computers were being made with not that kind of horsepower, but enough horsepower you could do your accounting. A clever person could program a word processor, a game, and that's where you got microcomputers. Microcomputers are different than the ones we use today. We consider those to be usually referred to as PCs. They're bigger and they're better, and obviously today they're millions of times faster than those computers in the 70s. But the rate of change of the power and use of those computers from the late 70s into the 80s was miraculous. If you ever have any interest in this, I can refer you to a great YouTube channel. It's called Computer Chronicles. And it was a television show out of San Mateo, California, that chronicled, starting about 1983, the development of these computers. And you will learn more about computers. I don't care if you're an engineer already. You will learn more about the different components in a computer by watching this show than you will ever just pick it up through thinking you understand how a component works. If you're not someone who specializes in electronics or building computers and really gets involved with it, it was all explained in a way that kids were able to program video games. They have episodes where kids come on the show and show you video games they made, which are mind-blowing if you think about the lack of processor power these kids had. Like 5 hertz, 20 hertz, not even a megahertz. Memory, they might have 5K all the way up to 64K if their father was rich, okay? 32K was something you could buy from Radio Shack and bring it home for about $500. 32K, okay? The reason why I mention this is that the rate of growth is right in front of your face, and that we have cell phones now with millions of times the computing power of supercomputers that help generate movies like Tron, the first CG movie ever made in 1982. What took them 6 months to render in a computer can be done in probably about 5 to 10 minutes in an average telephone today of 2023. That's how much more power we have today. I just want you to keep that Moore's Law in your brain. Moore's Law is, it's a little antiquated today, but it's fairly accurate still in that it is the rate of growth of technology year over year. Now, what's funny about Moore's Law is that it will come up to, you'll have people talk about computer chip enhancement, making them smaller, meaning they use less power, but they're also more powerful. So imagine that. You make it smaller, loses less power, and it's more powerful than the chip that came out the year before. They have said over and over for the last 25 years that these chips can't get any smaller, and they always get smaller. So man is always figuring out a way to get through these barriers. So when you see anything today and you think, that won't happen, virtual reality can't get that much more intense. Well, that is going to be the epitaph of several people's obituaries, okay? I'll give you an example. You have a retina display that is typically used in sort of the cheapy VR helmets, right? You put it up to your face through some lens mechanism and you're staring at it. It makes you cross-eyed a little bit, which is why you get pukey after about 15 to 30 minutes. You still see, even with retinal displays, which are so photoreal when you're staring down at your phone, when you put them up to your face through those lenses to create a virtual reality helmet, you still see the solder marks between the packets. Now, if you relax your consciousness and try not to see it, your brain will go ahead and accept it, and it will erase all of the grid markings that you can see. But now what if, and this is technology that's being developed right now, what if they made an LED just a few orders of magnitude over an atom, which is essentially how small they're making these little transistors inside a CPU. Now imagine a CPU being made big enough to make a screen that you would stare at. You would be staring at a screen with more points of light than you have rods and cones in your eye. At that point, you won't be able to distinguish between reality and putting that helmet on. Now, whether or not they can get that into an optic that can be worn on your head is one thing. The other thing is obviously the bigger you make a chip, the more specs can happen when they make the mold and when they make the actual silicone injection and spread it out and photo print on it. So it'll be very, very costly because they have to throw away more than they make. That's why chips cost so much, although they're getting much better at it. The other problem is that if you have a bunch of pixels of data inside of a virtual reality helmet, you have to ship the data from a storage device or a calculation from some video game in memory from the point where it's doing all that work, which is usually something pretty hot and big like a computer, and you have to ship it to the headset in real time. If any of the frame rates go below 60 frames a second, the human starts getting nauseous because it doesn't match. When they turn their head, it's slow and sluggish, and the brain starts to want to throw up. So there's hurdles. But then there are agencies that will pay for this kind of stuff. I'm just going to mention like CERN. CERN is always developing the latest and greatest thing, but there's probably hidden agencies as well. And don't be surprised if the consumer Oculus that you can buy today is 1/10 the power of the one you can buy a decade from now. Now, there has to be demand for products in a normal world, right? You watch Shark Tank, you'll see all these deals come out and they're picking them apart with how much money they've earned versus how much they value the company at. And they can't get investment a lot of times because they don't have adaptation. The society's not buying their product. The difference is, and you see this all the time, and you'll scratch your head. You'll go, gosh, how'd that company get all that money? It's a stupid thing. Well, the difference is there's agenda behind a particular technology. It doesn't matter to those in control if you make money from something that's going to result in controlling a society. They want to control at a level of greed that has no price tag. And so they will dump billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars over decades into these technologies because in the end, they get complete control. I assure you that if you came up with any invention that would be ubiquitously worn by a human being, meaning no complaints whatsoever about its comfort, about its effect on the body, but it yielded complete control over that human being. And you can make it as popular as an iPod or an whatever. And you went to the richest person in the world and you said, look, I'll give you this technology. I'm smart enough that I've separated the recipe. You'll never find it unless you give me $1 trillion. They'll give you the trillion. They'll give it to you. They might have some stipulations, but they'll give it to you. And they'll develop it. And they'll deploy it. Because they want the control. Now, we talk about it often that new technology is typically considered magic before it's understood by society, right? And we know from events like September 11th that there are moments in time that are so horrific that man, unless you lived a really bizarre life, maybe worked in defense and you had to plan those kind of things, contingency plans and that kind of stuff, you wouldn't have conceived that they would have done, anyone in the world would have done what they did. Whoever they did that, and for whatever reason they did that, right? So now, how many people on this planet, let's just say you're stepping to the realm of expertise now. Maybe you've already been there, and maybe as a result of listening to this episode, you're starting to use your faculties and go, oh yeah. You're starting to conceive of something that perhaps you didn't conceive of before. I'm going to try to continue to present facts to you so you understand how palatable this technology really is and how close it is to doing what they want to do with it. But if you told the average baby boomer that their great-grandchild is going to wear some sort of goggle, some sort of implant that's going to take over virtually everything that they see in the world, everything will be imprinted with something else. And of course, there'll be utility services like, let's just say a bunch of cameras in London know where every car is, every big giant, what they call lorries or giant trucks, which we call here in the United States, and you want to cross a street. And your implant knows that a car's coming. And because of calculations, it's very obvious that if you step out there right now, you're going to die. And so your glasses vibrate. They give you maybe even paralyze you from walking across the street because you're going to die. Now, of course, there won't be any cars driven without automation by the time this probably comes out, but let's just do that as an example. That will help society adopt it, right? They want to put microchips, for instance, in every human being. And they're selling it to you because, you can keep track of your kid. You can keep track of your health or all that stuff. It's currently, very few people in the world have implanted themselves. A bunch of kids in Europe did it starting about 15 years ago to get special access to nightclubs. And they put it in the web of the hand between the thumb and the index finger. And I think every single kid came down with some sort of irritation, aka cancer, because of the electromagnetic stimulation, thus destruction of the cell at that point. They all had them pulled out. You don't get that story. I saw 2 or 3 articles over the last 15 years where people took photographs of their hands and their hands are just mauled at that point, almost like some sort of, like a spider poison was injected in that region of the hand. It necrosed their cells. It was gross. So right now they've developed watches. Watches that look at your, biometrics. Of course, all that's being shipped off to some central location. Of course, they say they don't, but they do. We know that cell phones currently absorb all of the camera information, all of the audio information. And at any one point in time, they could use that information to paint a picture of a particular room. And now, since cell phones have LiDAR built into them, it just depends on the orientation of the phone in the room. But if they've been even recording the transportation of the phone within a particular destination over the course of, say, 10 days, they will have LiDAR'd your whole apartment, your whole house. They will know where you store things. Maybe the technology to do what's called object recognition, which again, they see a bit of a shape because of LiDAR radars or LiDAR lasers going out and taking a picture of your room. They may already have the database that will at least construct what they find to be a threat, right? They don't care about your hard drive or your speakers, but they want to know if you own a handgun that's not registered or some sort of firearm. They want to know something else about you. But they've snuck all this stuff in through a utility promise. I heard someone the other day, I was at my smoke lounge, and he said, someone gave me an Apple Watch, and I don't even know what to do with it. He's some guy in his late 60s. And someone sat next to him and said, oh, well, gosh, you know what they'll do for you? And pitched him all this stuff. And I doubt he'll actually turn it on, but he placated the person, pacified them, and said, oh, yeah, okay, well, maybe I will turn it on. He doesn't want to do it. But there it was, the full scenario of pitching this to him. We know that through video games and cell phones and the lockdowns that occurred, kids have lost a whole generation of development. Their educations went from hero to zero right away. And even if you were a child that was a straight A student, there's a lot of studies that these kids are now barely passing. The kids that were barely passing, oh my gosh, they're walking up and down your local thoroughfare, either going up on meth or down on meth. And they're just a few doses away from grabbing a fentanyl dose to kill them. The other thing that's happening is that we have, let's just say your country. Let's just say overall, your country's got corruption in it, which one doesn't. But for now, there's not exactly any major development going on in any of these sectors of development. And you look at your country and you're like, we're traditional, we love our mountains, we love our valleys, and we're very traditional. We play music and dance and sing and have, rituals for a month once a year to really celebrate who we are. I don't think this is ever going to take off because the kids are brought up into that. Well, I think it's probably an idealistic view no matter how you view it. But the other one is there are enemy states out there, and they're being given a lot of money. And they're being given a lot of technology and a lot of education in these areas. And even if they're not as savvy as for maybe the average IQ in your country, because you come from a longer line of higher IQs, they will eventually, like the old theory of a monkey pounding on a typewriter forever, would eventually write the works of Shakespeare. They will eventually develop some modification of technology. And there's always geniuses in cave-dwelling societies. There always are. And they will get to that next piece of technology. And then that technology will become a proprietary weapon of that country. It could be, like TikTok, the country that runs that app, and I have seen videos of their laboratories in the country that is trying to say it doesn't control that app. I've seen their intelligence agencies running the content. There was a video that went out over, I think, Telegram. It was on Rumble. All the logos in the room, all the interfaces, all the content. It wasn't like it would have been $1 million production if someone was faking this, maybe even more. But to their own country, they broadcast really productive things. Education, culture. There's no pornographic material. If you try to go in any of those directions, they'll block it if it's trying to come into that country. But for every other country that runs that app, you are inundated with the worst influences, especially for a child. They're at war with everybody else. Now, a technology can benefit your society, and it can be detrimental to a society. Sometimes exclusively, but that's pretty rare, where technology can only help or technology can only destroy. Usually, it's the same technology that when the content is flipped, it can be bad. In the movie Brainstorm, and if you haven't seen this movie and you're interested in this subject matter, if you're still listening to my voice, I'm going to say you are, whether you know it or not. I think this movie came out in 82. It was Natalie Wood's last movie. She got pushed off a boat by her husband in Catalina Island and drowned in the water because she was drunk. Not her. I mean, it's not against the law to be drunk. So death being the repercussion for getting drunk is a little extreme. But in that movie, they developed this technology. Like I said, you put this little headset on and it completely usurped all 5 senses of your body. And they also developed a mechanism to record it. And actually, the effects are pretty damn good for today, to be honest. But it was a laboratory that was developing this. It was the woman who played Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Christopher Walken, who was married to Natalie Wood in the movie. And they had a laboratory. They were just making this at a university, and they're making progress. But in the middle of the movie, what ends up happening, and I won't ruin the ending for you at all, because this doesn't address the arc that goes to the end of the movie at all. The government steps in, and this guy in this albino guy in a Colonel Sanders outfit comes in, and he basically says, we're taking this over. And Christopher Walken's character was written to be idealistic, that would never happen. Nurse Ratched's character was written to be utterly suspicious and warned him the entire time. They're going to come into our technology and they're going to take this over. So don't be stupid. And there's this third guy who's kind of the administrator of the university who was just ready to sell everything out, man. He was just wanting his money. But you fast forward down the movie, and there's a little subplot. It doesn't have to do with the overall main reason for this technology. But Christopher Walken's character hacked into the military version of his own software. And he got distracted, so he hooked up this little portable unit at his house with the headset, and he saw part of this introduction, but he got swept away by something in the house, some event, and he left it there, and his son walks in the room, puts his thing on, and the recording that they created was nothing shy of brilliant. It actually works with today's visual effects. You could just release it today and it would work, other than the clothing looks old. The kid ends up in the hospital from watching what happened to him through this military version. So it was the same technology that when Christopher Walken was using it, it was the most beautiful technology in the world. And when the military used it, it was basically MK Ultra on utter steroids, okay? This movie is a great educational device for you to understand sort of what's at stake here and how technology is developed, who is behind it. Because let's face it, technology takes technology to create in most cases. You have to get some money from somewhere, or you have to have inherited a bunch of money to sit in a cave and develop technology by yourself to get the pieces and parts that you need. Sometimes that occurs. Royal Raymond Rife had a family that believed in him when he was creating the microscope that could video cancer eating a cell. a little microscopic bug that was eating your cell. He proved it because he videotaped it, or he recorded it on film, I should say. That's rare. When we know that a particular giant corporation is just gaining more and more power, perhaps your mobile device, when you want to search for something, goes to this corporation every single time. There's even 2 choices that your mobile device will use to search, and both of them are completely controlled by these organizations, by the same organization that was fictionally portrayed in the movie Brainstorm. That means every move you make, every thought you have, every question you have about the universe, if you put it through their engine, they know. And talk about, watching one of those sort of FBI shows where they develop the psychological profile on a human being. They only have like a handful of information about Ted Bundy as they're trying to figure out. I think this was the first dude they did it with. They try to figure out who you are, where you might go, how you might behave so they can catch you and get rid of you because you're a threat. Well, you may not understand big machine learning. You may have heard that and not understand what it is, but what big machine learning can do is take a bunch of information that is conclusive, meaning let's just say they had a 20-year-old kid who died at 20. Maybe he got the drink. He's born in 2020, or he's born in 2000, and he takes the drink and dies in 2021, before his 21st birthday. And that kid was always inside of some sort of technology. His personal computer, his mobile phone eventually, because the kid wouldn't start using a mobile phone until probably 2008. Well, geez, the smartphone was out. Let's say his parents had some money. They will have that kid's entire life in a computer, what he actually did do, who his parents were, who his brothers and sisters were, where he lived, what his income is, whether he grew up in a conservative house or a liberal house. And that becomes a set of data that's 100% conclusive. It's empirical data, not to be debated. If you put that inside a big machine learning engine and millions and tens and hundreds of millions of other people's lives, that computer can predict you. If you match any one of the metrics, which at that level of data, there's people just like you out there, at least in the way that they want to know about you. There's always some snowflake property about you that, is different than everybody else. But you'd be surprised. And if you doubt that, which I doubt you do, just think about this. Jack Nicholson said something brilliant one time. He said, a celebrity of his caliber meets more people in a single year than most people meet in their entire lifetime. I would add to that probably to an order of magnitude more than you'll ever meet in your entire life. If he met 1,000 people in 1 year, you might meet 1,000 people in your whole life. Maybe. Even 500 people starts to get to about the average person's life. What if he met 50,000 people over the course of his entire year? I mean, he's in his 80s now, right? He's been famous since 1959, okay? Big machine learning is the predictive programming of a different kind. It can predict who you are as a human being. Now, obviously, like I mentioned, that technology could be used for good. Imagine that technology was pointed at you through some interface, and it was a relationship that goes something like this. The application's called Make You a Billionaire. And what the app does is it says, we know everything that you know, because you've been gracious enough to feed it into our system. Thank you very much. Involuntarily, and if you had the app, voluntarily. And it simply tells you where to be at any one point in time to achieve your next level of success. It's not just business that it could teach you to be in the right place at the right time. It could teach you to take a class because people like you like this teacher, like this professor, like this college. Maybe you should just read a book. Maybe you should watch a movie. We know how it's going to affect you. We know what parts of that movie are going to be a big takeaway for you. But you know what it could also do? You could also find your next wife or husband because it knows who they are too. It knows how to perfectly match you together. And there's plenty of fictional shows on TV where this has been the case. In fact, I think there was a Black Mirror like this. The way that you want to parse this in your head is if a technology, let's just say, had a rating system on it of how much it could help you. And let's just say the big supercomputer could get to 100%. It could help you do everything. It could help you eat the right food to make your body feel great, give you energy, make you sleepy at the right time, get you up. Because it's controlling your destiny, well, you want to wake up. Now, what you do with the mathematics on that is you say, well, for everything it can do positive to my life, it also, by sheer design, on the other side of the equal sign is the same value. Remember, the formula on the left equals the formula on the right. And so it can create a negative impact on you just as easily as a positive one. And that's what you need to understand. The thing I see, because I hang out with a lot of guys in their 60s, okay? The thing I still see is this almost impossibility to understand why someone would be dark, why a controlling body exists to do them harm. They can't conceive of it. Even though, if there's some sort of bad event in the world that we think might have been orchestrated, they'll want to talk about that at length, ad nauseum. But they can't see that that event could be anything other than accidental, serendipitous. You could mention certain things in history that are known to have been faked, and sometimes they know those things and sometimes they don't. But regardless if they know, they still don't give it any credit to applying to anything else. But they also know, if you talk to them about, well, you know, the people that run the world just want control. They already have all the money. They'll say, oh, yeah. So it's interesting that people can have all the evidence inside their mind. They can have all the ingredients to make the most delicious food in their kitchen, but they can't conceive of bringing it together to cook the meal. Even if you don't have to turn on an oven, just put it all in a bowl and it tastes great. They can't conceive of it. You know your friends who are chefs, culinary experts, they must look at us like we're crazy. They look around a kitchen and they say, man, if you just bought some carrots, I could make this. If you bought some steak, I could make that. I mean, you got everything else. And some of you have been privileged enough to have friends like that who do that in front of you, and it's like magic, man. Reality is not something that most of this generation, even the younger generation, can conceive of being stolen from you. And what's interesting about that is that, and there's a little bit of talk about this with AI, right? Supposedly there's some Senate hearings about potentially limiting AI's participation. Good luck. If you watch Computer Chronicles, one of the most amazing, probably about 4 episodes you can find throughout the 80s. Once Computer Chronicles enters the 90s, it's not as interesting to watch because it starts catching up with your your knowledge of technology. But in the 80s, software piracy was the big thing. They didn't have any laws on the books about copying a disk. It wasn't a crime to take a disk without any copy protection on it, which was all the software pretty much written up to about 1985. Few companies figured out ways to do it, but most of them didn't. And they had guests on who were epic software pirators, and they would sit next to the CEOs of the companies they were destroying. And at this point, there's still some good companies, just your uncle that was a genius, created a piece of software, and he was making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then all of a sudden, he was making tens of thousands of dollars because this kid in San Francisco was copying the software. It took years for our legislation to catch up and ban software piracy. Technology had to be invented to create serial numbers. Then technology was invented to create the USB dongle. You had to put a little USB thing in the side of your computer, which had the serial number on there encrypted. If someone pulled that out, you couldn't launch the software. There's still, I think, a couple pieces of software that still need that. I mean, it's just caveman technology, unbelievable. So when you see this technology emerge, you're going to see how quickly just distorting one little thing, not everything in the room, but one little thing being changed, will totally start molding the new generation of kids. And it's not until that technology starts crossing the line and creating problems with those kids that anyone will even move a finger to limit it. But what you need to know is that the people that will be doing the hearings and trying to pass laws on it, well, they're all bought off people anyway. And the more that we look the other way when our governments are being completely stolen from us, with digital technology, might I add, well, the people that are in there are already bought off and pre-selected anyway. They have them on a particular island in the Caribbean that's very famous. They got pictures of them doing things and movies of them doing things that will keep them in check. Now, the funny thing about that is we hear that all the time, right? We hear this, a particular politician or CEO's got some dirt on them. What people haven't realized is that no one ever gets exposed, because that means that everyone gets exposed, right? Just Bill Cosby getting exposed for using Quaaludes and various, I don't know, drugged out bourbons and stuff. That started making everyone else look at their life experiences and going, well, my gosh, I was with this other celebrity and the same kind of thing happened to me. So by exposing Bill, they expose hundreds, if not thousands, of other celebrities that did the same exact thing. And I'm sure without knowing, there's cases out there pending with people that you don't remember. They never got maybe movie star famous, but they got movie star rich. Maybe they were an agent, a manager. I'm sure they're in litigation too if they're not dead. But the other thing is how do you perceive danger on any one thing in the world? There's really only two ways that are the primary techniques. Either your family member or you yourself, friend, whatever, someone in your sphere of influence gets injured by this thing, and then you have the empirical evidence, the proof that your kids screwed up because they took a drink and it fried their brain, and they blame it on some other medical condition which has nothing to do with it. Or the press tells you. The press tells you that it's bad. Well, we've been so gaslit by fake things, right? They tell us everything that's good for us is bad for us, and everything bad for us is good for us. And they even make things up completely that don't exist. Certain things that might have to do with how warm the earth is. They make it up. And they buy off thousands of scientists. They get people that you wouldn't trust in any other realm of any conversation who all of a sudden walk up to a podium and tell you that this is all real. And for some reason, if they wear a suit and they've been embedded in politics, they're suddenly more believable when they talk about a crisis, because some certain people just need to have a purpose to live. And since they don't have their own brain under control because they're staring into too many cell phones, it looks official. Gosh, I'll save the world is what they think. And it's a commodity now, right? It's a product. It doesn't have to be true. You can have a guy that was high on fentanyl. He was a known kidnapper. He had a rap sheet a mile long. His death certificate says he died of fentanyl, but they're going to blame it on somebody else to create a situation. I mean, if we had a real sort of idiocracy Shark Tank, there'd be a Shark Tank where these sharks are not sharks or something else, you know, scumbags or whatever. Scumbag tank, right? And these people would walk in and go, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make people feel like we're running out of air, you know? And I built this regulator. This has actually been created. I wrote it into a fictional movie as a joke, and it's actually real now. But you wear... In my movie, I created a breath mask that you would wear, and on the outside, it was a digital readout of how many breaths you'd taken since the last time it was, you know, downloaded and registered, right? And they just pitch a bunch of crap. And, you know, the scumbags would probably be CERN, DARPA, you know, whatever other government agency that wants to do it. All funded by George Soros, right? And they would sell them, and they'd manipulate society. But instead of like a Shark Tank situation where it would be, well, how's your online presence? You know, do you have a storefront? Have you thought about going to retail? Blah, blah, blah. It'd be all, well, we're going to need to, it takes a lot of money to pay the press to say all the same thing on the same day about your thing. So that's going to cost you this many billions of dollars. And then this, well, we own, you know, one of the scumbag sharks would be like, oh, I own like all of the press people. So I'll just send out an email and they'll all say it. So my offer's better. Wouldn't that be hilarious? Those meetings happen and those agendas are hatched, but it's all to curtail and cull the masses, to knock them off one by one. And just remember, as you think about this technology changing someone's reality, think about if you took a drink that's recommended to you to get rid of some illness that you haven't had yet. And it destroys your brain just enough you're weird. And if you do it to your children, well, maybe they lose the power of speech. Maybe they gain a horrible tic. Maybe they're just constantly on fire. I mean, they're just talking 24/7. They're just weird and awkward. Now, what they've done is they've taken whoever is the victim of that situation and they've turned them into someone that nobody can marry. You can't marry them. You can't even communicate with them properly. So they're never going to spread their seed. And that one child is basically canceled out. And if you're the parent, well, you got a couple choices, right? If you can take care of your child, you will, and that's going to suck your life down. Sometimes kids get so injured that they have to be put into homes because there's nothing else. They need constant care 24 hours, and no human being can do that. An institution has to do that. And who's going to pay for that? So even though you might be able to locate your child in a different area to take care of them, you still got to pay the bill. I have friends in this situation, that exact situation. It's brutal and gnarly on their lives. Every single element of your reality that is important to you, which I would suggest is every single nanosecond of input and intake, if it is corrupted in any way, shape, or form, then it will have this general outcome. There's a lot of you that have seen movies, television shows. They haven't done one in a long time that I know of, but the old Faust argument where this Faust mathematician dude, as legend goes, signed a deal with the devil. Several Twilight Zones that do this. Well, how does it go? How does it go every single time? You might buy a ticket to see a movie that does this, or you might spend even your home viewing time watching one of these episodes. And here's the interesting thing. It's sort of like the movie Titanic. You'd have to be under a rock to not know Titanic was the ship that actually wasn't the one that sank. The Olympic was the one that sank. Go see my episode on the Titanic. deepthoughtsradio.com. Search on Titanic. But you do the deal with the devil, and as soon as you see that plot line come across your television screen or whatever screen you're viewing, you know the guy or girl who signs the deal is going to get screwed. The only twist they could possibly throw at you at the end of the story is that somehow the person gets out of the deal. Somehow. But most of them conclude the way that they always conclude. But why are you paying for the ride? Why are you spending your time that you could spend on something else? Because you're looking to see the writer come up with the most clever plot line where someone thinks they've got the devil by the short hairs. They think they've outwitted the devil. And every single time, at least in all the ones I've ever seen, the devil is in complete control the entire time. If you apply that story archetype to all these things that we've talked about that we know are not out for our benefit, but they're selling us the notion of a benefit, right? Then you'll have pretty much the basic mechanism in your mind to avoid falling for these situations. There's a Twilight Zone. It's very famous, but it's in the 4th season. You can watch it on Paramount Plus. It's about a multi-millionaire in the 50s, 60s, gets approached by this beautiful girl who's the devil. And he's bored of his life. He's like, God, if I could just go back and do it all again, I would be so happy just to go back to being broke and just being smart and make the right investments. And she says, hey, I can make that happen, The twist at the beginning of the Twilight Zone was cool because he says, well, I suppose you want my soul. And she goes, no, we got that a long time ago. That was a brilliant little twist at the beginning. But what he has to do is liquidate all of his property, all of his businesses to her. That's the payment to go back in time. And he says, okay, I know how this works. You're going to screw me, basically is what he says. And so he goes, look, I want to look exactly like I do right now. I don't want to be an old man when I go back. And he goes, I'm going to need some money. That's all I need. And so they work out a money deal. It's a little more complicated to get the money. But he does. He goes back. And I think it's like probably at least 30 years back. And he's trying to do stuff. And he thought he was really smart, but he forgot that a lot of the technologies that make his knowledge work haven't been invented yet. So he's running into a bunch of obstacles as soon as he goes back. And I'm going to ruin this one for you. It's still super entertaining to watch. But at the very end, he finds out, as he gets more flustered and angry at the situation he keeps running into that he didn't plan very well, he's going to have to wait, like a decade before certain technologies even arrive, right? But he realizes he's tired. He doesn't feel too good physically. And what he realizes is she made him look like he looked back in those days, but she didn't age his internal organs back to what he needed, what he had when he was probably 30 years old or 35 or whatever when this thing started. And so he says, oh my God, just send me back home. And of course she rapes him before he gets back home. And everything's different when he gets back because he's no longer the rich guy. He's the poor guy. It's really cool. Lots of twists still in that show I didn't talk about, but that's a good one. I've mentioned this from time to time, but I'm going to mention it again as sort of an allegory to this form of thinking. My hometown has a little website, and there's an obituary section there. And because I try to stay in touch with my hometown, I look at the front page, read the newspaper, and I always go to the obituary section. You want to know who's gone and who's still here. We've had a flurry of people pass away who are in their 90s to 112. I mean, all the way between those two spectrums. And they made it, If you make it to 90, I think you've won the game, right? Anything after that's, regardless of your interpretation of aging, you are in the gravy stage of life, right? As long as you, have some mild level of consciousness and control of your being. But the next step down, there's kind of a gap. There's about a 20-year gap where people that are in this 20-year gap between, say, the 90s and the 70s, they're still adhering to the old ways. They're eating foods the old way. They're living their lives the old way. And so this mezzanine that doesn't die is going to make it to their 90s and their hundreds. But the ones in their 70s, 60s, and below, well, per capita, they're dropping like flies. Now, of course, the drink is nailing tons of people in my hometown. It's real easy to see someone under 50 years old passing away, and we've got them all the way down to like 18. They work for the hospital, which made them take the drink, and so they got the effect. And it's always the same thing. Passed away unexpectedly. We had another one, born in 1971, just disappeared. Now, in one particular case, I found out the guy was shot by another dude, but most cases, it's very easily trackable to a Facebook post about how we're all idiots for not taking this regimen. But it's very difficult in today's society, right? Because everything's a trend. And if you're not in the trend, well, your kids will reject you. Society may, depending on where you live, reject you. Again, the closer you get to a big city, the more you're screwed. It really is the case because they'll just ostracize you if you don't adhere to technology because they're using it like crazy and they want to have conversations with it. And in a lot of cases, they want to integrate this technology into their businesses. And so you can't get jobs unless you're totally into it. And that doesn't prohibit you from being an extremely productive resource for most companies. Maybe you drive an old car. Maybe you have a flip phone. Hey, as long as they can get a hold of you, they usually don't care. But what if email is imposed on you? What if other technologies are imposed? You have to get a smartphone. Well, now you're carrying around that thing. I don't think any company would want you to necessarily wear a watch or anything. But now imagine this AR technology, this augmented reality technology comes around and it's something to do with the manufacturing line that you're in. You have to stare at things and they want you to see the heads-up display. But let's just say like cell phones used to have battery covers on the back and you could just pull the battery out, throw it away and get a new one. It solved the battery. We didn't have any battery problems. And people might complain about when they had to buy them. But when Steve Jobs made the iPhone, he locked up that back and you couldn't take it out. And then everybody followed suit. It's forced to be on. As much as I'm a fan of his, I think he was working for a different agency behind the scenes, either through trickery or deliberately. I don't know. You never know what people are really made out of unless you know. Well, if you have an augmented reality headset on for work and you have to keep it on to do your work, and everywhere else you look, it's messing with your reality. And just like the back of a phone, this particular service cannot be configured to turn that off. Don't be surprised. Well, then you're going to have to eat their fake reality. And imagine as you get an upgrade to your telephone, which gives you new features on your phone, usually it's driving more notifications from social media into your phone. That's been Apple's game for, almost 15 years now. All the OS operating system, whether it's your phone, your iPad, or your computer, it's been driving more addiction mechanisms into your phone. More little red dots that you are Pavlovianly drawn to touch because you want it off your screen, which means you're going to have to ingest a bunch of notifications. Companies now have usurped warning notification interfaces for marketing interfaces. Dropbox does this. It used to be you'd only get a red dot if it had a problem syncing a file or you're running out of disk space for your plan. Now it's, we got new things. We got this thing. All the companies are doing that now. That's like a boy called wolf if you ever saw one before. You no longer have any sensitivity to the red dot because it's just some marketing crap. Whatever. My computer's still running okay. But imagine getting an update to your reality. Are you running 2.0 yet? Oh gosh, you got to get 2.0. The streets look so much better. You know these new features they have? They'll tell me where a Cinnabon is down the street. As I go over there in my hovercraft because I weigh 800 pounds, right? I don't know how you stop it. I hate to say it, but it's almost instinctual because the mechanisms that instill massive change for the negative are sometimes the same exact mechanisms that will instill massive change for the positive. This has happened all kinds of times in history. Fighting the Civil War in the United States, the Revolutionary War in the United States yielded a better generation for a little while because they never go to sleep. They never stop pushing. I don't know what that would be. Some big come to Jesus moment. There was this letter 17 that was promising all this was going to happen. I think most intelligent people have tuned out of it. It'll just be replaced by something else. I think right now they've almost built a cognitive dissonance engine inside everyone's mind such that everyone's willing to create a fictional reality around them to just deal with reality. It's obviously very sad. The biggest thing that we can do, because a lot of people will ask me, well, what can I do? I mean, I agree with you. What can I do? Now, again, I'm not trying to say everything I'm saying is 1,000% correct or 1,000% right or whatever. I don't have a magic ball, crystal ball, as they say. I'm just trying to apply logic to the situation. Having conversations is gigantic, okay? I do it all the time. And people, this is what I've discovered being me, okay? You want to definitely work on your delivery, okay? If you're, I don't know, there's some people don't have a lot of friends because for whatever reason, the way their voice sounds, the way they dominate a conversation is just sort of repulsive. So you can always tune that up a little bit. Try to be cool. But I talk to guys at cigar lounges all the time. At least once a week, I get a guy who's come in, and I don't know who he is, and we just start shooting it. And then, I usually let them bring it up. Almost 90% of the time, they bring up whatever subject matter I'm about to jump on, right? Because they're expressing an interest, and I don't feel like there's anything so impending right now. I need to run in a room and go, hey, everybody, pay attention to this, right? So I just let them bring it up, and then I give them every single key to unlock every lock that they have been sitting on top of. And a lot of these people are super intelligent, and they've just been waiting for another human being to have an intelligent conversation about it, which means we don't have all the answers, but we are concerned. And so what will end up happening organically is they share their portfolio of knowledge with you and their expertise and what they've seen and why one thing was more believable than another. And then you do your round and you just keep going back and forth. And before you know it, an hour, 2, 3, 4, 5 will go away. Sometimes you'll have a conversation about subject A, which is non-controversial, and it allows you to share sort of your expertise with each other. You start to trust one another. Now, if you're about to, and then subject B comes up, which is the controversial one, and then you want to lead in with something that's more soft, like, hey man, I know this sounds crazy, but this keeps happening, and I just think, I started looking into it, and man, I was pretty shocked. I got a cousin that does this, a brother does this, a best friend that does that. We used to work here and do that, and it's weird. My short stint for 2 years in the pharmaceutical industry in drug inception has helped me get people to understand that corporations aren't your friends, And if they're trying to give you medicine for your body, you got to be extremely careful. I have friends of mine that are just getting as many drinks as possible, take as many pills as possible. They even complain about trying to track all their pills, when their solution is probably stop taking the pills, man. Find a better way. I mean, take a vitamin, it's natural, but find a better way. Some people are impenetrable because they're so vested at this point to change trajectory. They feel like I'm going to judge them if they admit that maybe they didn't have the drop on reality, which is not the case. And that's going to be something you'll run into your whole life, right? I know many of you have already experienced everything I'm saying. When VR blew up in 2016, 17, it was being pushed in your face, right? Pushed in your face, pushed in your face. When the VR thing blew up because nobody wanted to wear a helmet on their head and screens weren't that great, the technology wasn't that great, idiot Tim Cook's telling all the Apple employees, hey, you don't want to buy computers, you want to buy mobile devices, but all those augmented reality units need a computer to really do anything intense. He screwed the pooch. Now, if you pay attention to anything related to augmented reality eyewear, it's all gone under the ground right now. The glass product that was invented, it still exists, but it's under the ground. A few companies are using it to aid design and that kind of stuff, but I mean, that's not even profitable. It's negligible. It's still operating at a loss, but billions and billions of dollars are being stuffed into those technologies. From my perspective, there's not enough innovation in the technology to make it really appealing just yet. I've been at giant think tanks that occur in movie theaters because there's so many people in it, with big boys in those rooms, and they're all saying, I don't want to wear something on my head. I already wear glasses. I don't need another thing on top of my glasses making me look like an idiot. And I don't want, it's already too expensive to buy eyewear as it is. I don't want to pay for something else. And these guys are millionaires. So there's hurdles. But I'm willing to bet, as we cannot look into the bowels of these organizations because they're being very secretive about it, that some of these things are being dealt with. And so the next generation, I'm really watching for Apple to put it out, because I think that they've got a car in development and they have AR goggles in development, eyewear. And I think it'll be amazing that I got as deep into this technology as it went. The biggest rumored one was Magic Leap out of Florida, and I think that was just a big money laundering organization, right? They lied about all their technology. You have to wear a Ghostbuster backpack on your back to get it to work. They said they fixed the cross-eyed problem with the technology, but then they tried to sell developers the development kits at some incredible $3,000 a unit, and they're like, really? You raised $3.5 billion and we got to pay $3,000 to make your product successful? Here's a finger. Go ahead and sit down on it. So I think that the amount of technology that's going to have to leap, okay, pardon the pun there, is going to be orders of magnitude over the last thing we ever saw. I had students at Noman Film School. They were getting these units for free, and they were selling them on eBay. I mean, not Magic Leap, but they were getting Oculus. They were getting the Samsung headset. I'll just give it. And they're like, I don't own a PC is what most of them said, so I can't turn this thing on. When we taught at Chapman, they had one computer in the entire department that could run a VR unit, and they ended up having to buy, I think, something like 20 new computers at like $6,000 a piece just to run these units. Who the hell's got that kind of money to have some virtual reality experience? And then Apple suddenly comes out with an iMac that was VR ready. Go on Amazon, look at all the products on there. Laptops, high-end Alienware laptops, which Dell also releases under their own brand, they'll say VR ready, VR ready, VR ready. So they're trying to saturate the market with the ability to turn these headsets on. Apple can't really do that right now, so they're going to have some complete solution. Maybe from the telephone to your headset. I don't know how they're going to do it. But you need to be ready, and you need to have your eyes wide open, not wide shut, as to what this means. Watch what metrics, meaning what part of reality are they usurping, taking over, and replacing it with something artificial. Because that is where it's going to be most important. Because if they were to prioritize a secret technology to basically gain control over everyone's brain, they're going to prioritize things from 1 to 10. They're going to have 2 lists. They're going to have the upsell list, which is stuff that's cool, we don't really care about, saving a person crossing the street. Quite frankly, they're the kind of people that want you to cross the street and get hit by a lorry. And the other list is the bad list. The bad list is most likely several times longer than the other list. And so when you see this technology, I would suggest that you don't completely run away from it. You don't have to buy it. You can buy it if you want, just as an kind of a little exploratory research, and just see where they are trying to replace reality. And there's going to be something negative about it. Now, they might get super clever and put it out with nothing but beneficial things, that you can't find anything wrong with it. Just keep watching and keep watching. Version 2, version 3, version 4. I would assume that they wouldn't release the product unless all the bad stuff has already been figured out. And it's a shame. I need to say for the record, it's a super shame, because this could be the coolest thing if good people developed it, where the list is nothing but great things, and it's all mitigated for bad things, meaning, well, we did this and it started to mess with kids' levels of attention span. And so we pulled this out because it was shortening their attention span. We know that's not what they care about. TikTok's a product you can download on your phone. Anyway, hopefully you feel me on this one. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. As I always say, everything's up there. There's a search field up there. There's a new top picks up there. And the top picks is designed exclusively so you can pass this channel to somebody else. They can watch a bunch of cool stuff without a tremendous amount of controversy or cerebral episodes like this one, and get attached to it and enjoy it. Remember, the only purpose of this show is to get you to think. Regardless if you're agreeing with me or disagreeing with me, it's to make you think. And the more you disagree with me, and I'm not trying to do that, it will make your mind actually function more than if you totally love everything I say. I just want to turn on those dip switches inside your brain in every single sector of everything. That's why all these episodes are so random and so strange. You have something to contribute to society. I guarantee it. You have solutions to a lot of these problems. And a lot of you, if not every single one of you, I believe it's every single one of you, you were born. Your life journey was designed to solve some of these problems in a permanent way, for at least the stage that we're in. There's something that you have figured out how to say, something you figured out how to do, either online or in person, that will change the entire world. You have the catchphrase that will become the most popular catchphrase to undo some of their crap. Case in point, memes, right? Memes have become the most amazing single image methodology of keeping society from being completely full of crap, all the way up to 100%. Keep that in mind. We're all probably living memes, to be honest. If you can make someone laugh and ingest truth at the same time, it might be a really great technique. They're paying off comedians every day to get on stage and say a bunch of Agenda 2030 crap. Why don't we fight it in our own way? Anyway, to the PayPal and Patreon folks, thank you so much. You make it happen. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.